Welcome to the OK, Let's Learn podcast. This is two podcasts in one. One where we dive into tons of great books and stories, and another where we just dive into tons of great, interesting topics. My name is Kevin O'Keefe. So today, let's learn about the Battle of Bull Run, the Battle of Manassas, the first Battle of Bull Run, and the first Battle of Manassas. And yes, really the first battle of the Civil War, the Battle of Fort Sumter. I thought that was the first battle. Yes, it was. But was it an equal fight? No. So now you want to go back to my earlier episode on the Battle of Fort Sumter. That was in April of 1861. The Civil War now has begun. Abraham Lincoln calls up everyone and anyone from all these local militias in the North to fight against the South, to hold the Union together. So here we are, a few months later, July of 1861, and this is important to understand right up front. These were volunteers. These were militias. This was not a standing army. When I say a standing army, this was not an organized number of experienced people that have been in the army and are in the army. No, this was 75,000 regular people, factory workers, farmers, anyone. But the heights, the excitement was on, and that's what they called it. On to Richmond, the capital of the new Confederate States of America, and the North felt like they were going to crush them. It was going to be over. As a matter of fact, here we are in July of 1861, and people that had the wherewithal, people that were rich, congressmen, they set up blankets over a hill to watch this battle because they figured, oh boy, this is going to be interesting, like it's a football game, like it's a baseball game. No, it didn't turn out to be that way. Now you have to understand also up front the perception from each side. The people in the North, they figured, well, nope, they didn't have as many people, that militia, again, the people in the South, in terms of putting together an army, this is a brand new organization. This is a brand new country. They didn't have anything in terms of an army. It didn't exist. So a lot of people that were actually in the North, from generals right down through regular people, they switched over to the South. Now, keep in mind, these were people that, let's say, were temporarily up in the North. Like, obviously, a lot of the generals, future generals, people that studied up at West Point. But if you were originally from the South and your sympathies, your family was from the South, now you're sticking with the Confederates. And you're going back now to the South to fight the people in the North. And they figured, hey, they knew a lot of people in the North. These are just factory workers, regular people that they've never picked up a gun. And again, the North, like I said, no. People in the South, they don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the brain, so to speak. There was a lot of animosity. They called the people in the North the Yankees, and they called the people in the South the rebels. So this is the circumstances with Abraham Lincoln deciding, yes, we are going to make sure that this Union stays together. And here they are now about to meet on the battlefield, the first real battle of the Civil War, July 1861. Now here again is something important to understand because there were a lot of lessons learned as we come out of this battle. Lincoln wanted to push forward and get the job done quickly. But like I said, both of the armies were a complete mess. If you had enough money, if you were a local politician, if you were someone in a town or a city that had a name and you wanted to get together a bunch of people to fight, you could do that back then. And they call these companies. It's almost like a group of people. It's actually just only 100 people. Then if you get all these companies together, this would be a regiment. So there's all these terms used throughout the Civil War that I'm going to touch on. But a regiment is about 10 companies, or in other words, about 1,000 men. So here you are putting all these different number of peoples and number of companies and regiments together, and talk about disorganized. And the uniforms, they were a complete mess. The Union soldiers, for the most part, wore gray. The Confederates wore blue. But some didn't wear any uniforms at all. Some wore different color uniforms. And there was so much friendly fire. With the smoke and all the shooting, you would have soldiers that would come upon you and, oh, look at this. It's the Union soldiers. They got gray on. But no, they were Confederates because they would start shooting at them. There was no organization. There was, but there wasn't. So let's picture where we are now in this battle. Washington, D.C. is to the east. Richmond, the Confederate capital, is to the south. And in between are farms, land, rolling hills. And right there is this little town of Manassas. Why is it there? Because of the railroad. The railroads were the highways of the time. If you controlled the railroad, you controlled everything that was moved, supplies, reinforcements, and you'll see, even soldiers. Yes, this was key to this battle. Right near Manassas is this small creek, which is called Bull Run. And you may be thinking right up front, why is there two names? Well, the North named all these battles in the Civil War after natural features, areas, rivers, creeks, and that's why it's called the Battle of Bull Run. But no, of course, they disagreed about everything, so why can't they disagree about the names of the battles? And this still is the case today. You go down south, and Battle of Bull Run? Oh, you mean Manassas? So yes, the South named the battles after the nearest town. So this was the same battle, but two names and certainly two ways of looking at it. So it's July 21st, 1861, 5 o'clock in the morning. The sun is just about to come up. It's quiet, it's peaceful, but no, in minutes, it's about to be chaos. On one side, you had the President Abraham Lincoln for the North, and his main general was a fellow by the name of Irvin McDowell. Irvin McDowell was from West Point. He knew his comrades from the other side in the South. He's careful, he's thoughtful. And like I said before, he knows his army's not ready. On the South, the president is Jefferson Davis. The main generals were someone you heard from before in our previous episode of Fort Sumter, P.G.T. Beauregard and Joseph Johnson. And yes, you will find out about another important general. His name was Thomas Jackson. But you don't know Thomas Jackson today. You know him by another name, which we will get to. Now, the size of the armies. The Union had about 35,000 soldiers. The Confederates, about an equal number, 32,000. Well, it sounds like a lot. And it is, but remember, like I said, these are all volunteers. They've been trained only for weeks. And here we go. Now they're about to be tested. Now, where is everyone? I mentioned Bull Run. This is this creek moving from east to west. And the Confederate Army ends up staying on the south side of this creek as like this natural barrier, this protection, this defense, so the North couldn't get down to Richmond. And of course, what is the Army up in the North trying to do to make sure that obviously the South doesn't go further north to D.C.? This is the perfect spot for the first battle of the Civil War. At first, the Confederates think the Union is just going to come straight across the creek. But McDowell had a different idea. He doesn't want to run straight across the creek, right? He wants to go around them. And this is called a flanking move. When you go around to get behind troops, you're now coming up from the back, from the rear. So it's almost like you surround them. If you can get around their line, whether you're the North or the South, in any battle going back to ancient times, these flanking moves are key. So this is the first movement. Between 6 and 7 a.m., the Union Army begins to move northwest first, then curves back up southwest. They're trying to cross Bull Run at this one spot. It's called Sudley Ford. As they cross, they're going into the water. They're slipping on the rocks. They're trying to hold their rifles high enough to keep them dry. It's slow. It's messy. It's not perfectly organized, but it's working. They're getting around the Confederate left side. If you're looking down at the map, this is all the way to the west, the left side. Now, as they cross Bull Run, they cross the creek. What's rising up in front of them, slightly to the south? Two hills. The first one is called Matthews Hill. It's the first high ground. And beyond that, further south, is the Henry House Hill. Yes, there's one house from the Henry family that's sitting right up on top of this second hill. And ultimately, this is where the big battle will eventually occur. Now, ultimately, just think of this. The reason this is all happening, these flanking moves, it's all about surprise. That's what the North is hoping for, and initially it works. Now it's 8 a.m. Gunfire, bangs, here we go. Smoke fills the air. The forces, the Confederate forces behind P.G. Beauregard, yes, they're surprised. The Union pushes forward, and back they go. The South is moving back. Step by step, they push the Confederates back across Matthews Hill. Remember, this is that first hill. And as much as the Union is winning, there's still lots of confusion. Like I said, the uniforms are mixed up, the commands are unclear, the soldiers are hesitating, but they still fight on. Now it's 11 a.m. Henry Hill. Listen to this. At the top of this hill I mentioned is this one house, and inside is this widow, Judith Henry. She can't move. She's older. And here she's surrounded. Can you imagine this? She can't escape. The battle crashes around her home. The cannons are firing. The walls are splintering. Soldiers on both sides, literally both sides of the house, are now fighting against each other. Now it's 11:30 in the morning. Confederate lines begin to break until this one moment. Thomas Jackson, I referenced him before. He's holding his troops. He's the leader of some of the Confederates. And another general sees him and he shouts out, "There stands Jackson, like a stone wall." Yes, Stonewall Jackson. He holds the North back. At this point, it's basically a draw. There's an impasse. No one has the advantage. The battle slows. The men are exhausted. Heat is rising. Remember, it's the middle of July. Are you kidding me with all these wool jackets? But the officers, the generals, they're trying to figure out how they're going to proceed next. They're trying to reorganize their lines, but it's still chaos. Now it's 1:30 in the afternoon. And yes, out there in the west, if you look at a map, you have the Appalachian Mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains. Between them, as you go south, west of this area, west of Manassas, is this valley called the Shenandoah Valley. And initially, there were a lot of men stationed out there, 12,000. Now, I mentioned that the number of soldiers on both sides were about equal. Initially, that wasn't the case. The North had more, and you can see the advantage. But now, with the 12,000 coming in to help out the South in terms of being reinforced, the numbers were about the same. And how did they come? How did they arrive? On the railroad. For the first time ever in any battle, soldiers were transported by a train. And yes, it was this Manassas Gap Railroad that brought them from the valley immediately onto the field of battle right there at Manassas. Are you kidding me? This was a game changer, and it was the turning point in the battle. And yes, the hero that came out of this war, here he is again, Stonewall Jackson. And what does he do as they are fighting man to man, bayonet to bayonet? He says, "Yell like furies." This high-pitched, horrible scream that literally people from the North still today, generations later, have nightmares over. What ultimately was this called? The Rebel Yell. So you have Jackson, Stonewall Jackson, and all of his new reinforcements coming in on the railroad. It's 3 o'clock. And yes, this is absolutely the turning point. The North hits a wall. It's struck from the side with Jackson's attack, and the Union line bends, and then they break. The rout is on. The North soldiers end up scattering, running for their lives. They're throwing their guns to the ground. They're dropping all their equipment. All the formations of the lines are lost. And get this, on the same road out of Manassas are all these people that were picnicking. They were watching the battle. They are now running for their lives with the soldiers, arm to arm, shoulder to shoulder. Some of the carriages that were brought in to watch the battle, they're blocking the road. People are screaming. The horses are panicking. And there was decisions made in this moment where the South should have kept the battle going, chased after the people in the North. But the reality was everyone was completely exhausted. It's now 6 p.m. The battle is over. The Confederates hold the field. It's clear. The South wins the first battle of the Civil War. It lasted over 10 hours. Thousands are killed, wounded, or missing. And the big realization hits the North. Lincoln now understands this war is not going to be quick. He has to regroup his army. They have to be trained. And yes, there's this realization that this is possibly going to take years. And as we know, it did take years. One soldier said, "We went out to see a show. When we came back from a war." Now, to wrap up the podcast, you may be thinking, what happened to the lady that was in the house on Henry Hill? Judith Henry, an 85-year-old widow. She was sick. She was confined to her bed, and she refused to leave. She ultimately was the first civilian casualty. She was killed by a Union artillery fire right there in her bed. She ended up passing away the next day, buried there on the hill. And yes, the whole house was destroyed, but it was rebuilt later, and now it's still there at a visitor center at Manassas National Battlefield Park. Manassas is still there. As we go on in the future podcast episodes, we will learn about a second battle at Manassas. And this is a suburb today of Washington, D.C. It's still there. You can visit where the battle was fought right there at this creek called Bull Run. And one more final point before we wrap up the episode. I will say this. I've said this to my students all the time. I'm no different than you. Yeah, I'm 64 and you're 7 and 8 years old, but I make mistakes all the time as well. And I made a big mistake here in the podcast episode. I said the Union's soldiers wore gray and the Southern soldiers wore blue. No, it was just the opposite. Talk about a mess with the soldiers and their uniforms and not knowing who was who. How about me not knowing what was what? So, yes, the Union soldiers wore dark blue jackets and light blue pants. In the South, they wore gray pants and jackets. They actually faded in some cases to this brownish tan. They called it butternut. That was because of the dye shortages down in the South. So, yes, big mistake, but listen, hey, this is life. Friends, thanks for staying with me on this journey, learning all about the first battle of Bull Run, the first battle of Manassas. Reach out to me at kevmok21@gmail.com. We have a Facebook group called OK Let's Learn, and yes, we're on YouTube. So subscribe, follow, hit that bell so you can get notifications when we release new episodes. And until next time, have fun and keep learning.